The human return to the moon is imminent. Artemis 2 is practically ready for launch. And right at this moment, NASA is making a course change. In a surprisingly clear press conference, Administrator Jared Isaacman presented a new Artemis architecture.
Artemis 3 to launch in 2027 with a revised mission profile. So instead of going directly to a lunar landing, we will endeavor to rendezvous in low Earth orbit with one or both of our lunar landers.
Standardization instead of constantly new configurations, which basically means that the next SLS blocks and their larger upper stage, the Exploration Upper Stage or EUS, are about to be discontinued. The new stated target cadence is less than a year between two launches. Artemis 3 will no longer be what we expected, no crewed moon landing, but rather a rendezvous in Earth orbit. And in 2028, suddenly 2 landings in a single year could become possible. My name is Serwan, and this is Mars Chronicles. Isaacman was surprisingly candid. Artemis 1 flew over 3 years ago. Artemis 2 is now almost ready for launch. Artemis 3 would have followed another 3 years later, according to the old plan. A launch cadence of over 3 years for a rocket like the SLS is, according to NASA, not a path to success. Why? Because skills deteriorate. He called it muscle memory. If you only launch every 3 years, you lose operational routine, experienced personnel, and process reliability. And this approach gives little opportunity to build technical confidence. That's exactly what you see with the problems now. The helium and hydrogen issue. Artemis 1 already had to deal with hydrogen and helium leaks. Artemis 2 had hydrogen leaks again during the first wet dress rehearsal. And the second attempt went completely smoothly, so a major press conference was held to enthusiastically report on the success. Shortly after that, right after the rehearsal, helium flow problems suddenly occurred. As a result, NASA was forced to roll the rocket back into the VAB to fix the problem. The point is, the symptoms were similar to Artemis 1. And Isaacman publicly asked the crucial question. Are we really getting to the technical core of the problem, or just almost? If these problems occur again after 3 years, then it's no coincidence. And now comes the most radical part. NASA is standardizing the SLS. So no Block 1B and most likely no Block 2 either. So no Exploration Upper Stage either. It shouldn't be reconfigured after every mission. Instead, Block 1 will become the new standard, which basically means that the ICPS, the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, is being developed further. The upgrades are almost certainly based on the Centaur 5 architecture from ULA, because the ICPS itself is nothing more than a Centaur upper stage. Here in the infographic that Isaacman shared on X, you can see what it will look like. For Artemis 2, it's still the ICPS, just as it is on the rocket today. And for Artemis 3, the new variant will already be used. It's very interesting compared to the original design, a slightly elongated tank and boom, you have your new upper stage. Instead of turning it into a 15-year development and $1 billion business. By the way, the ICPS is simply a Centaur upper stage, for which ULA charges $500 million per unit plus development costs. The design already existed before and has flown. Isaacman puts it this way. We don't want to make every rocket a work of art. That's a clear departure from the previous approach of configuring each mission slightly differently. Standardization means faster production, less complexity, better mass production, and above all, a higher cadence. And the goal is extremely ambitious, to go from 3.5 years to less than a year. In the long term, even 10 months. If the cadence were to stay the same, it would take 35 years for us to have 10 missions. On average, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and the shuttle didn't launch every 3 years, but every 3 months. Isaacman brings a strong example. There were only 2 months between Apollo 8 and Apollo 11. Today, 3.5 years between missions. That is not acceptable. Important? Artemis 2 is flying as planned, free return around the moon. 10 days, the first since Apollo beyond Earth's orbit. The current plan? Work in the vehicle assembly building. The affected helium components in the ICPS are being replaced. And while they're already there, they want to conduct a root cause analysis to find the core of the problem. In addition, the batteries of the flight termination system are being replaced, an end-to-end test for the Eastern Range. A lock seal is also being replaced. This gives the Orion closeout crew additional practice. In the crew module, time-critical items are also being replaced. The rollout is timed so that the rocket spends at least a week and a half at the pad before the mission starts. The goal is the launch window at the beginning of April. Realistically, between the 1st and the 2nd. That's ambitious, but definitely doable. And at this point, I'd like to show you my SLS model. We printed it right here in the studio with the Core 1 from Prusa. 3D printing has never been so easy and useful. And I haven't printed anything yet with the new glowing filament, but you can look forward to some cool glowing models. And of course, 1 or 2 rockets will be raffled off again. A huge thank you goes to Prusa for the support. And with that, back to Artemis. The most radical step, Artemis 3 will be completely changed. And now comes the real bombshell. Artemis 3 will no longer be a moon landing. Instead, it has been moved up from 2028 to 2027 and is supposed to demonstrate a rendezvous in low Earth orbit with one or both HLS providers. That's basically Apollo 9 reloaded. The goal is the docking between Orion and the HLS. If SpaceX and Blue Origin both manage to get their landers ready by then both will be docked with as well. If SpaceX doesn't manage to get Starship ready by 2027, then Blue Origin could get its chance with Artemis 4. That would be a huge plot twist. But back to the objectives. Crew transfer is supposed to be tested and system and suit interface tests will be conducted. Possibly also an astronaut in an EVA suit in microgravity. And all of this in LEO. Why? Because you can't just jump straight from Apollo 8 to Apollo 11. Isaacman says it quite openly. Right now we have an architecture that does Apollo 8 and then wants to land right away. That's not a path to success. Artemis 3 with the new LEO architecture doesn't require orbital refueling, so no 10+ Starship tanker launches and no complex lunar landing. That massively reduces the development risk. According to NASA, the major risks are the production risks with the SLS and the Orion capsule. And of course, the most obvious development risk is orbital refueling. The Artemis 3 LEO tests address both. Some interpret this change of plans as a delay, but it's anything but that. The goal isn't shifting. In the old architecture, the crewed Artemis 3 landing was scheduled for 2028. This mission is now being moved up to 2027. Instead, Artemis 4 is scheduled to land crewed on the moon in early 2028 and Artemis 5 at the end of 2028. Isaacman said, if we reach the 10-month cadence, we could even have 2 landing attempts in 2028. That's extremely ambitious. Workforce initiative. 75% of NASA's workforce are contractors. Isaacman wants more civil servants, so basically government employees. He wants to internalize more core competencies to be less dependent when it comes to turnaround times of the routines at the pad. In his eyes, many contractors should actually be civil servants. That is a structural reform. There were no surprises because the prime contractors, HLS providers, and Congress had been consulted and informed in advance. Not only did they have no objections, but they also stand firmly behind the accelerated Artemis architecture. Isaacman emphasized several times. Everyone understands. Its 3-year cadence is not sustainable. That cannot be emphasized enough. With the new architecture, we could have completed Artemis 5 by the end of 2028. With the old architecture, at best we would have had Artemis 3 at the end of 2028 and Artemis 5 would have been sometime in 2035. And that's if everything goes 100% according to plan. And we know how often things go 100% in spaceflight. Especially when you only launch once in a blue moon. He says it very clearly. In the 60s, NASA basically had unlimited room for mistakes and setbacks. Not today. That's an elegant way of saying China is real and they're hot on NASA's heels. But he also emphasizes, even without China, this architecture would have been wrong. Exploration upper stage buried? With all the talk about standardization, it is implied between the lines that the second planned upper stage, the exploration upper stage or EUS, has been cancelled. Officially, however, no one wanted to use the word cancelled. Several reporters asked very specifically, has the exploration upper stage been cancelled? NASA's answer, we're not talking about contract details here, but at the same time, standardization to Block 1. No major configuration changes, the ICPS will continue to be developed, and we are aligning with the Centaur 5. Later, NASA stated it very clearly on their website. With this architectural approach, NASA is currently evaluating alternative options for the rocket's second stage. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage, which will be used for the first 3 missions, is to be replaced by a new second stage. At the same time, the agency is no longer planning to use the exploration upper stage or the mobile launcher 2 since the development of both systems has been significantly delayed. So apparently the mobile launcher 2 has also been cancelled. That's a very clear statement in practice. Block 1B will no longer be the backbone of the architecture. And that's huge because the EUS was more expensive, more complex, more time consuming, and basically the only reason for the mobile launcher 2. It's already about 90% finished, but its original role is becoming unclear. With a few modifications, it could probably be used for the standardized version. ICPS and Centaur 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 19, 20, 21 propulsion stage based on the Delta IV upper stage. 25, 26, 27, 28. Upgrades will be based on the Centaur 5, so that means 29. 30, 31, and higher production maturity. But let's briefly come back to the change. 33, 34, 35, 37, 42, 43, 44, 44, 45. From Blue Origin and Space, 47, 50, 51, 52, 53. 54, integrate for the first time. Both systems are new, complex, and still under development. To be honest, that was extremely risky. Here is what happens now. Artemis 3 will be an integration test. And that's the classic NASA approach. It's one of the reasons for the old architecture. 57, 58. 62, 64, 65. 68, 69, 69, 70. 73 has a clear path. If they launch more, then Congress is ready to bear the costs. With the new architecture, Isaacman has effectively said that he will take the contractors by the hand so that 73 and 75, 76, 77, 78, 80, 82, 82, 83, 84. Arbeit bleibt. Dort brauchen Sie keinen Mo. 85, 86, 88, 89, 90, 92, 92, and no complete lunar architecture. That reduces development pressure, but 95, 96, 97, 98. Im Gegenteil, Artemis 104, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17, 20, 21. 22 clearly stated the biggest development risk factor is orbital refueling. Artemis 3 bypasses exactly this risk. 2 landings counted in 2028 are only possible if the 10-month cadence is achieved, the hardware flow is stable, Orion production is accelerated, and HLS is operational. However, there was one thing NASA wanted to sweep under the rug, which is why, of course, everyone noticed. Gateway was repeatedly blocked. Isaacman said, in essence, let's focus on the hardest part, the landing. Gateway isn't dead, but it's no longer the bottleneck. That means the architecture of the moon landings themselves has also changed. In other words, the crews might no longer use Gateway to transfer between Orion and HLS in lunar orbit. The rhetoric on NASA's side about Gateway being so essential for the Artemis architecture has disappeared. Instead, Isaacman will brief Congress over the next 2 months. I always enjoy cool space projects. But Gateway is such a big stain on this project that I'm extremely glad it's now almost certainly being cancelled. But the existing hardware won't be thrown away. Instead, it will probably be used for research on nuclear propulsion technology. This is speculation now, but alternatively, the crews could transfer directly in low Earth orbit or directly in lunar orbit. But for now, in the present, the priority is the SLS Cadence, the landing, and standardization. No additional multi-billion projects. By the way, the increased cadence will also lead to a price reduction. That could lead to a positive spiral. But there's still one question we haven't answered. Does all this mean that the SLS is saved now? What we'll see is that the SLS will be used as long as private providers haven't established themselves. That could actually happen in just a few years. Write in the comments how many SLS launches you think we'll see before it's discontinued. If you had to sum up this press conference in one sentence, it would be this: NASA is back to its own roots. Not in marketing, not in big announcements, but in incremental test architecture. The original Artemis profile: unmanned tests, 3-year pause. Crew around the moon, 3-year pause, then straight to the landing. That's not a test program, that's a leap of faith. ASAP, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, had criticized exactly that. And now something is happening that you rarely see in space programs. NASA is saying it publicly. Yes, that wasn't optimal and they're changing it. All thanks to the brilliant new NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman. He has high standards, and the goals that have been set are not easy to achieve. But rational doesn't automatically mean easy. One thing can't be emphasized enough: cadence is safety. Flight frequency creates experience, confidence, technical intuition, and decision-making routine. Muscle memory is the key word. Isaacman didn't use the word by accident. Interestingly, that indirectly strengthens the Mars plan. Why? Because it means better production lines and integrated test architecture, exactly the skills you need for interplanetary missions. This press conference was not a defensive appearance. It was on the offensive. Congress was informed, the industry, workforce, and HLS providers were briefed. No surprise, no panic, just a sober course correction. And that's refreshing and remarkable. When Artemis 2 launches in April, it will be the first crewed mission beyond Earth's orbit since Apollo 17. But the real story happens after that. It's not the landing that's the turning point, it's the cadence. If NASA manages to launch Artemis 3 in 2027, Artemis 4 at the beginning of 2028, and Artemis 5 at the end of 2028, then we're in operational mode. My name is Serwan, and that was Mars Chronicles. Thanks for tuning in per aspera ad astra. At this point,